Somewhere in the deepest darkness of the universe, scientists found something impossible. A black hole so ancient that it may have existed before the galaxy around it. That sounds backwards, like finding a human heart before finding the body, or discovering a city built around a skyscraper that somehow appeared first. Yet that is exactly what astronomers using the James Webb Space Telescope now believe may have happened. The object is called QS01. At first glance, it looks insignificant, just a tiny red speck, a faint dot buried among thousands of others. Nothing about it seems special, nothing that should have scientists staring at it for months. Yet somehow, this tiny point of light has become one of the most puzzling objects ever discovered in the distant universe. The reason is simple. The light reaching us today began its journey billions of years ago. That means when we observe QS01, we're not seeing it as it is now. We're seeing it as it existed near the dawn of cosmic history, a time when the universe was still young, when the first galaxies were only beginning to emerge from the darkness left behind by the Big Bang. And that's where things start getting strange. Because when astronomers analyzed this object, they found clues suggesting that something about it doesn't fit comfortably into our expectations. Something that shouldn't be there, or perhaps something that appeared far sooner than it should have. At first, researchers wondered if they had made a mistake. Maybe the measurements were wrong. Maybe the object was closer than it appeared. Maybe there was another explanation hidden in the data. But as more observations arrived, the mystery only deepened. The deeper scientists looked, the more questions emerged. What exactly are we seeing? How did it form? And why does it seem to challenge the timeline that astronomers have spent decades building? To investigate, researchers turned one of humanity's most powerful space observatories toward this distant speck, an instrument capable of peering farther into the universe than almost anything that came before it. What they found would ignite a new debate among cosmologists, a debate that is still unfolding today. Because hidden inside that tiny red dot is evidence of something extraordinary. Something that may reveal that the early universe was very different from what we imagined. But before we can understand why QS01 matters, we first need to uncover what this mysterious object actually is. And that's where the story becomes truly unbelievable. To understand why this discovery matters, we need to understand something strange. When you look at the sun, you're not seeing it as it is right now. You're seeing sunlight that left the sun about 8 minutes ago. But when you look at the Andromeda galaxy, you're looking much deeper into the past. The light reaching your eyes began its journey 2.5 million years ago, long before modern humans existed. But James Webb looks much farther. So far that it sees light from when the universe was still an infant. The timeline of the early universe is surprisingly short. First came the Big Bang, then the first stars ignited, and eventually those stars gathered together to form the first galaxies. QS01 comes from a time only 700 million years after the Big Bang. The universe was barely 5% of its current age. And that's where the trouble begins. Scientists thought they understood how giant black holes are born. According to the traditional picture of cosmic evolution, the story begins with stars. Vast clouds of gas collapse under gravity, giving birth to the first stars in the universe. Over millions of years, some of these stars exhaust their fuel and die in spectacular explosions, leaving behind black holes. These black holes don't start out as cosmic giants. They begin relatively small, then gradually grow by feeding on surrounding gas and by merging with other black holes. Over time, they become larger and more powerful. The universe didn't seem interested in following the rules. Soon after Webb began observing the early universe, astronomers noticed something unexpected: tiny glowing red objects scattered through ancient space. Scientists called them little red dots. Nobody knew exactly what they were. Some suspected hidden galaxies, others suspected rapidly growing black holes. Then, one object caught everyone's attention: QS01. Because unlike the others, nature accidentally gave astronomers a closer look. More than a century ago, Einstein predicted that gravity could bend light. Most people think of gravity as a force. Einstein described it as geometry. Massive objects bend space-time itself. The timeline of the early universe is surprisingly short. First came the Big Bang, then the first stars ignited, and eventually those stars gathered together to form the first galaxies. QS01 comes from a time only 700 million years after the Big Bang. The universe was barely 5% of its current age. And that's where the trouble begins. Scientists thought they understood how giant black holes are born. According to the traditional picture of cosmic evolution, the story begins with stars. Vast clouds of gas collapse under gravity, giving birth to the first stars in the universe. Over millions of years, some of these stars exhaust their fuel and die in spectacular explosions, leaving behind black holes. These black holes don't start out as cosmic giants. They begin relatively small, then gradually grow by feeding on surrounding gas and by merging with other black holes. Over time, they become larger and more powerful. Scientists weren't just looking at QS01. They were measuring the motion of gas around it. Teams, led by researchers including Roberto Maiolino and Lucas Furtak, used Webb's instruments to track gas orbiting the object's center. The faster an object orbits, the stronger the gravity pulling on it must be. And stronger gravity means more mass is present. By measuring how fast material moves, astronomers can estimate the mass of the object creating that gravitational pull. The black hole weighed roughly 50 million suns. But that wasn't the disturbing part. The disturbing part was everything around it. Scientists expected to find a large young galaxy feeding this monster. Instead, they found almost nothing. The black hole contains at least 2/3 of the total mass of the entire system. In modern galaxies, black holes usually make up only a tiny fraction of the galaxy. Here, the black hole dominates everything. It was almost as if the black hole arrived first, and the galaxy was still trying to catch up. Instead of stars creating black holes, giant clouds of gas may have collapsed directly into one. Scientists have explored this possibility for years through direct collapse black hole models. Some physicists have proposed something even stranger: black holes born shortly after the Big Bang itself. A possibility once discussed by Hawking may no longer sound completely impossible. The most uncomfortable possibility is that our models are incomplete. Scientists thought galaxies created supermassive black holes, but QS01 may be telling a different story. Maybe black holes weren't passengers inside galaxies. Maybe they were architects. Somewhere in the darkness of the early universe, a giant appeared, and around it, a galaxy began to form. The question is no longer, how did this black hole get there? The question is, how many more are waiting to be found?